Okay, so let's have a demonstration, Stephen. You have to show us how it works.
Okay, so what I've pulled up here, let's start with it. This is our demo system, so we've got lots and lots of different use cases we can show you. So let me pick off one of these maps here. And what we've got here is a digital representation of an acute trust. And we've got different buildings, we could have different floors, etc., clinics. The digital mapping, of course, is a case of taking that from estates or even from DNA Spaces from Cisco might already have that map. So we can pull in information a different way. And then what we're doing is we're doing a digital representation of where all these rooms are, but that's an overlay in this system. So there's a lot of power in here to make sure that we can stay up to date, which is the key point I wanted to get across here. Even if there was a new wall and something joined together tomorrow, we can very, very quickly dive in here and change that. So we recognize that that's room 220 and it's joined in with 218 and made a waiting room. So it's fluid, and we go on a journey with this sort of technology. Now, what are we showing? You see lots of icons here. Well, so you can see I've got a list of all different things that are showing on this floor right now. But let's go ahead and use the search criteria. So this is just a web-based, a browser-based solution. There's no proprietary applications to install. So you can access this from any handheld device or, a nurse's station, computer, whatever it is. So I've just typed in IV pump because that's what I'm looking for right now. I can see there are 4 available here. Well, actually not available. There's 4 on the floor, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We can see 6 is currently in the dirty storage on floor 2, but it's been there for 8 hours. That's quite a long time, perhaps. Maybe that doesn't meet our cycle point, but we can look at that data in a minute. I've got 1 in room 219. I've got 1 in dirty storage in the cancer center. Here's a clean storage. Where is it? It's over here. So now I can go in and see it on the map. I can see it's an Alaris 7231. I can have an image of it as well. So as a reminder, because I don't make some models, I recognize it from the picture. I can see our battery level is fine on our tags. Now, the other thing is we can see it's available here, but most important is this next preventive maintenance date. Look, it's 29th of June. I think we've passed the 29th of June already. So perhaps this one's out of compliance. So this is where we start understanding if that was in clean storage and it was there on the 29th of June or before, surely that would have been a perfect time for the medical engineering team to get in there, take it out there, do the piece they need to do, or perhaps even better, when it's in dirty storage, they could come and do this guy. So, is this, let's have a look at the preventive maintenance day here. It's the same date. So 29th of June, it's sitting there unused and arguably unusable. Wouldn't that be a good time to make sure that we're running compliance with our assets?
I'm going to ask a question that I know my Wi-Fi engineers would be asking. How does that map get into there? How does that representation of the organisation go into the system? Is that something that can get loaded, or do you create that in the solution?
Yeah, so the team at Contact create this from the floor plans, or we can use it from what the Cisco DNA Spaces, if that's already there. So there's a number of different ways of doing that, but that's the first phase really of getting us up and running, is to understand where we want to start with any of these projects. And that's the important thing to get across to everybody today. It's not something you would typically say, let's go and do the entire trust, all sites, every possible service. All the hospitals we're working with today will usually start with one area and say, well, let's just start in this cancer center, for example, or perhaps in maternity where we've got dedicated assets and we can start there. And then we build. And the key thing here is, depending on that network infrastructure, it's incredibly easy to just keep building over time as and when budgets allow for it. It's the same system, we're just adding more devices in there.
How scalable is it? Health board or an acute trust, there could be many thousands of devices they need to keep track of at all times. How can we get to that place where if you're the head of medical engineering, all of the assets you're responsible for are held in the solution and trackable by the solution?
Yeah, well, ultimately this is really down to the strength of the Bluetooth low energy network. So if we have a Wi-Fi network with Bluetooth capability, then we're away. But remember, we also have the migration service, so it allows us to put it over Wi-Fi. So if there's any sort of Wi-Fi, we can also plug in the gaps using the migration service. So once we've got some way of these sensors talking back via, over an IP network, we're away. So that's a case of scaling. And because Bluetooth Low Energy is using tiny little data points here, it's really very easy for us to scale this up to tens of thousands of devices talking across, because it's not a huge data. We're not video streaming.
Okay, great.
So what I'm showing on here, I just wanted to share really, is around PAR level. So this is a classic example of saying, look, in the cancer clean storage, we should always have at least 2 and perhaps a maximum of 4, but you can see we're down to 1. In fact, you can see we're under in all of these areas, but it would be very easy for me from a medical devices or even a finance team to come in and say, well, look, do we actually need to buy more? Should we be buying more equipment? And we can get that information really quickly here. So we can see we've got below, but just as easy, we can see there's nothing above. So we've definitely not got spare in there across, across the trust. So lots of information. We talked about PM date. I can get a list of pumps. I could quickly dive in there and just as easily see what's going on. We've got environmental monitoring. There's a whole host of reports. So I'll go in here and just show you the sort of things that we can get once we've tagged everything, if you like, and we decide how much we're going to do. All of a sudden, we can get into this kind of area where we can see utilization of ventilators on floor 1 versus floor 2. Now, how easy would it have been for you, previously to get this sort of data? I'm assuming it's a manual thing of someone with just not a clipboard or
really, I would say, less than I had audited on that day and understands where things are at that point in time. It's just not possible. So we've got this, basically on a dashboard now, live to be used when needed.
And it's not using human resources to go and get this data. People walking around with clipboards. I've heard of teams that have started with manual clipboards, then go to an Excel spreadsheet, then going to an app, which they're paying licensing for. Well, actually, it's all part of the same system. And you can see here, from a buildings and estates perspective, how these particular exam rooms are unoccupied. How much time are we actually using in these consulting rooms?
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming this isn't representative of the NHS. I'm sure it's much higher than that. But of course, we're getting real data now. So from a new hospitals program, we now know whether we actually need to do this or not, or are we just using the space?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Quite a few sort of hospital build projects and location building projects, just thinking about how maybe some of this could, maybe a bit optimistic, but some of this could help to just think about how space is used inside the hospital as well.
Yeah. So what else can we see? We can see, any items or people in a particular space between a certain time. So there's an asset report of, how many have ever passed through here. Cycle time is a really interesting one for us to look at. And this is obviously a big one for the care providers. So it's just now doing a calculation across here. And we can now see how much time is being spent between different areas. So if we're looking within urology, we've had 47 visits. The average cycle time is 89 minutes. And we can see discharge there in exam in radiology. So waiting is the biggest chunk, 25 minutes on average that people are waiting. So this is the sort of data when we get into the management team, the leadership team, of course, within the trust, could get this just from, the sake of potentially a couple of pounds a month, as part of a whole tracking service that's provided.
Yeah, I think it's really useful if you think about people waiting in ambulances, for example. If you could maybe just look at flow through emergency department perhaps and just think about not tracking individuals or where they are, what they're doing for the sake of it, but actually trying to get a better system in place and using that data at that management sort of decision making level to look at where improvements need to be made and what we can do to really improve the kind of the throughput, if you will, of that area. I think that's really, really powerful, Steve. So I'm just curious, I suppose, really in terms of one of the questions I've asked recently. I know you don't necessarily have the answer to this today, but if you had a recall on a product, presumably you've got your list of assets in the database, you can just go and highlight, I'm going to arbitrarily say all of the trolleys, of a particular model. We can get a list of those. We can get a list of where they are. Someone can go off and go and find those. And again, you're not wandering around the entire organisation trying to find these things. You've got pinpoint accuracy of their location. Presumably, if they're wandering around the organisation, you've got your handheld to just keep track of them, and you can go and bring them all back and do the maintenance you need to do on them.
It's a good point that you make. need to think about when we get down to the specifics is I want a particular device. So we have the whole kind of GS1 compliance piece, of course, in the trust around QR codes, and everything has to have a specific ID. Well, we pair all that up with these guys. So, you know, that will show that this particular tag, which has a QR code on the back, is tied to that particular IV pump number 12345. So we can quite quickly run a custom report on that and say, show me where 12345 or every one of that type is right now, and then hand that out to the people who can run around the hospital and go straight there. But we are talking about massive savings in time on a day-to-day basis, especially around the preventative maintenance piece.
So I think that's really important. It's making to find this equipment that we're really kind of saying you've got that, you know where it is straight away. You still got to go and get it, but you know where it is.
You've got to go get it. And in fact, it came up with a trust earlier last week where the nursing team were just saying, just think about what we have. We have beds, a little bedside cabinet and a jug of water on there and a patient. There is no medical equipment there by default. So we have to go and collect everything, and every minute lost looking for something that isn't in the storage area where it was supposed to be, because when everybody goes, there's none there. So therefore they take one and then hoard it and keep it in their own little area. All of that sort of behavioural thing, which is at the end of the day is positive intent for the right reasons about delivering the best service of care. But actually at a bigger level is we end up with a mismatch of where the actual medical equipment is, where the patients are, where the staff are.
Brilliant. So just thinking about time.
Yeah.
Deck.